I'm John Burnham Schwartz, Literary Director of the Sun Valley Writers Conference, and this is Beyond the Page. In this episode, lucky listener, you get to hear the great Judy Blume, the author of 25 books for young readers and 4 novels for adults that all told have sold more than 90 million copies in 40 languages around the world. Blume's cherished, groundbreaking 1970 young adult novel, Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret, has captivated and enlightened girls and boys and their parents for 55 years and counting. I, for one, read it when I was 10, and it, along with about half a dozen other classic Blume titles, basically taught me everything I know to this day about girls and growing up. So consider me yet one more reader for whom Judy Blume was and remains a true literary rock star. Here she is, recorded live at the 2024 Writers' Conference, in conversation with her friend Jeffrey Brown of the PBS NewsHour.
So beautiful. Thank you.
In my life, as a reader and professionally, I walk through life with a lot of writers, and there are many writers I get to know who are admired, and many, of course, who are well read by the public, by the millions. There are only a handful that are loved in such a personal way, and this is one of them. So my hope in our time together here is that many of you know the books, but maybe you'll get to know a little bit of the lovely person who wrote those books, okay? And I thought we might start because when we were last together, about a year ago in Key West, there was a movie made of Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret. And you said to me at the time that it had taken a long time to allow a movie to be made.
Yeah, 50 years.
Yeah.
but seems like yesterday.
But why?
Because not every book has to be a movie. And I didn't want them to make a mess of it. And, we used to go on Judy Sweetheart lunches. Producers would take me, Judy Sweetheart, let's do the book. And it was like, no. And then after all of this time, I got an email, a wonderful and persuasive email from a writer-director. She's the first person who ever came to me with such a credential. Mm-hmm. Look, I made this movie, The Edge of 17. I'm like, I love that movie. Mm-hmm. And her mentor is James L. Brooks. Mm-hmm. Jim Brooks. Yeah. Some of you know from The Simpsons, and some of you know because he's a fabulous maker of movies. Mm-hmm. And she said, can we come to Key West and try to convince you? And I knew before they got there, it was going to be yes. I think there were only 2 things, and the one I remember is that as long as you set this in 1970, because it just will not work if you try to update it. Mm-hmm. And they said we wouldn't have it any other way. And so we made a movie, and I love it. I'm the only writer who says, that movie is better than my book. And I mean it. I think it's wonderful.
Well, I brought up the movie for 2 reasons. First, so I saw firsthand hundreds of people waiting outside. And, at a movie opening, they're all there waiting for the movie stars. In this case, Rachel McAdams and, some major figures. But they were all there for you because they all had remembered reading that book. And then as I was interviewing some of them, and people were just going through every single book. This has been your experience for a long time, right?
I'm very lucky, and I've had to try to figure it out. And what I think it is people who meet me who are now grown up, who read the books as kids, I represent their childhoods. And so there's a lot of teariness at these meetings. And childhood is really important. You don't get rid of the kid who was inside you. You carry that kid forever with you. And so I think that's what it is.
But I also picked that book because it was seminal for you. The theme of this conference of origin stories, do you remember the Judy Blume sitting down to write that book?
Yes.
Who was she?
I remember everything.
You do? That's scary, but who was she?
Well, she was a young woman. I had no idea what I was doing. I published 2 forgettable books before Margaret, although Charlemagne the God would be very angry at me because his favorite is Iggy's House. And that was my second book.
Yeah.
But I was learning to write. It was a learning experience. And then it was like, I'm just going to sit down and tell the truth, be honest, what I remembered about being on the cusp, being in 6th grade.
Did you have that actual thought?
Yeah, forget all the rules and regulations. I had taken a course, and I love that woman who taught the course, but she was old world, and she had rules and regulations. Mm-hmm. Everything has to be tied up neatly at the end. Children can't eavesdrop. What? Of course they have to eavesdrop. But she was wonderful, and she was supportive to me always, even after she read Margaret. She was,
But so you
sorry about that. I forgot. It has slips.
But you said to yourself, I'm going to just tell it the way I remember it.
Again, I didn't know anything. How did I learn to write? By reading. And that's what I tell everybody who asks me, especially kids. I'm going to be a writer when I grow up. How do you learn to write? Because you read and you love to read. And that's how you learn to write. So I was inspired by Beverly Cleary. I was inspired by Louise Fitzhugh's Harriet the Spy. Uh-huh. I was inspired by E.L. Konigsberg's first book, which is a very long title, but it was a very good book. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to write books like that. And a funny thing, so when I started out, series of books, which have become so popular now. Everybody's writing series. Series were out. And fantasy, George and I both grew up loving the Oz books. Yeah. Fantasy, out. Right. Today, of course, it's all series and it's all fantasy. Yeah. So it's cyclical, what happens.
But all of those books that you cited, and I think all of us can remember reading those, they did not address the things that you started to address.
Yes.
Yes. So what happened? You loved those books and you saw them as models and you said, I want to be a writer and I want to write books like that, but I also want to tell some kind of truth.
Who knows how things happen? I was obsessed for a year in my life with, wanted to get my period. I wanted to get breasts. I did all those exercises that Margaret does. I'll tell you the funniest story. Can I tell you the funny story? So when they were filming Margaret and I was there on set, Kelly, the writer-director, and I know better than to talk to the director while we're on the set, but I was watching on a monitor with other people, and the way she taught the kids to do it was like an aerobic. What do you say? When you do it like this, I must increase my bust. And I'm like, oh my God, that is so wrong. Well, we can't let that happen. And so I had a lovely woman next to me. She was kind of my liaison to Kelly. Yeah. And I said, Julie. And she said, I know. And she ran back and told Kelly. By then,
no, wait a minute. So what's the right way to do it?
I must.
Okay.
We all know the right way to do it.
I must. Not tell us or show us.
I must increase my butt. And so then Kelly said, oh, God, I had no idea. Because how would she know? She was a kid, did what she thought was right. Seemed to have worked for her. Yeah. Better than for me. And so Kelly had me teach the kids to do it. That was great fun.
But did you know that you right away were on to something? Was there...
No. I knew that I don't know what I knew. But I knew that I wanted to bring puberty into it because it was so important to me. And I would have loved to have had a book and read about real kids and their feelings about puberty.
What I was thinking about this word origins, your origin story, but you're really writing about the origin when many of us become who we are in a sense, right? That between period that somehow
I like
still
that period.
fascinates you.
I always like that period. And when people say, oh, she writes YA books, I'm like, no. First of all, there was no such thing when I started to write. That came way, way later. And my books are kids on the cusp, most of them. Maybe Forever's YA, but most of them were kids on the cusp.
Yeah. Because, I mean, what is it about that moment?
I mean, it was a really important moment for me. So it's also kind of the moment when you look at your parents and you realize that they're regular people. Your parents are regular people. And that's sometimes hard to comprehend, but it's an important step in growing up. I started writing in the late 60s. Well, I guess the first book was published in 69, so I was really an early 70s person. And everything changed. I mean, everything. I was a 50s kid. My mother said, you go to college in case, God forbid, you ever have to work, you ever need a job. That was how she saw it. And also, you go to college to meet your husband, because if you don't meet someone in college, where will you ever meet him? That's what my mother gave me. My father was totally different, and he was go for it, go for it. You know, there was a time I wanted to be on the stage. Here I am. And he was always go for it. You know, he was my champion.
Which never went away for you, right? I mean,
I lost him really young.
Yeah.
But he's always there.
Yeah.
It's there now.
So, you know, if anyone's reading your books or reading about you, you know, you can sort of go through the books and, I don't know, this one has masturbation, and then that one has the teenage sex. And, you know.
Right. That's the book about masturbation.
Yeah.
That's the book about getting your period.
Yeah.
That's ridiculous. You know.
Okay.
Because if you were writing about somebody on the cusp, again, like 12 years old, this is part of their lives. This is part of everyone's life. And I never got the message from my family that sex was bad. I got the message, you know, you better be careful, because if you get pregnant at that time, I knew girls, it changed their whole lives because there was no abortion. And so they had to drop out of school. Very top girls in my high school. So I did get that message. Be careful. But no one ever made me feel that it was icky or wrong, or that it wouldn't be fun sometime in my life whenever I was ready for it. And I was ready by myself for it before, you know, I didn't go tell my parents. Guess what? I found my special place. I didn't announce that to my parents, but I did to my friends. We all had.
I see everybody knows the reference
we
here.
all had our special places. Yes, Deanie had a special place.
Yes, I know. But nobody told you couldn't also write about these things.
That's great. Nobody told me.
And so
I didn't know anything. I didn't have a publisher. I didn't have an agent. By the time Margaret was published, I didn't have an agent, but I did have an editor who became the editor who gave me everything, who changed my life. The editor who was so brilliant and knew what I was trying to say and helped me say it as best I could. And we went through from Iggy's House all the way to Rachel Robinson. It was the last book that I did with him.
It's easy to sit here on this stage and everybody's with an adoring crowd and millions of books, but when you think back to the origin, there's no guarantee of that kind of success, right? And in fact, there's a lovely documentary in the last year or two, right, about Judy. And you talk about how people even then, as your books were having success, there was a condescension, right? You say, I think, when are you going to write a real book, Judy?
Right.
So
yes.
you ran up against that.
Yes, I did. I also ran up against the woman who called me. This was before the major censorship started in the 80s. This was in the 70s when Margaret was published, and she called my house and she said, "Are you the one who wrote that book?" And I'm like, "Yes." And she said, "Communist," and she slammed the phone down.
Really? That
So,
was the beginning of a long history, which we're going to get to talk
Yes,
about.
but I never figured out, why was I a communist? Was it religion, which is in the book, or was it puberty that made me a communist?
The other thing that clearly started happening for you right away, and this comes out in the documentary, you were touching so many young lives, and they were, just as it is now, it was personal, right? They were writing you letters. So you received, and these were sort of astounding scenes in that documentary, you going through the archive of thousands of letters. And many of them you responded to and developed.
I did,
Yeah,
yes.
tell everyone about this, because I don't really know any other writer who's had this kind of one-to-one relationship.
Well, there were a lot of letters, and I mean, in the beginning I tried to respond to everyone, and it became so impossible. But every kid who wrote got something. But the personal letters came from kids who really, they were writers. They were able to express themselves. They were able to express their feelings and their problems. And one of them, Lori, grew up part in Seoul in Korea and part in the States. And she was wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. She wrote in the style of Louisa May Alcott. "I quake in my boots each time I approach the B shelf of the library." It was actually each time a boy approaches the B shelf in the library, lest he see something he should not. She is now a woman in her 50s with 2 daughters, well on their way. Yeah. And Lori and I wrote all these years. I mean, we're still in touch. Yeah. Thanks to that documentary, we had a lovely dinner together with the family. Yeah.
But young people were writing you about their crises in some cases, or their questions. They were using you. Yeah. That must have been a little bit of pressure.
I didn't feel it then. I felt it many years later. There was one girl in particular that I developed such a fondness for. I wanted to save her. And that was an impossible situation. And because I was having trouble, and I did feel tremendous pressure then to help as many as I could, I went to a special therapist to help me, because I'm not trained as a therapist, to help people and to separate from them and their problems. Not to be a therapist, but to learn how to deal with this without believing that I could save this child or that child. She helped me a lot with that. She said, "You can be a supportive friend."
And you did?
I did, for a lot of kids, yeah.
There was one really funny one that I can't resist. It was a young boy. I wrote it down. He said, "Please send me the facts of life in number order."
That was a girl. Yeah. That was actually a girl.
Oh, that was a girl?
That's a girl.
Okay, excuse me.
Yes, it's okay.
Yeah. Did you respond to that one?
I can't remember how I responded. Here they are, 1 to 10. No, I didn't do that.
Did you ever teach writing? I don't know this.
No, I don't know if I would be any good as a teacher. I went to college to become a second grade teacher, but I never taught because, it's a long time ago. We got married early. I was married in college, finished, then got pregnant, had 2 babies by the time I was 25. We all did that in the 50s. It was like, we did it. It's what was expected of us, I think. And only later did many of us, a lot of friends, understand that they needed more. For me, it was a creative kid growing up, and I had plenty of outlets as long as I was in school. And suddenly I was home, and I had 2 little kids, and I liked taking care of them, but something major was missing. something really big was missing, and I didn't know what it was going to be. It could have been anything, but I was home with the kids, and I had pencils, and I had paper, and I had an old typewriter, and maybe it would have been something else today. I don't know. But I always had the stories.
Yeah.
In a way, I was always a writer, because when I was 9, I had my pink Spalding ball. Anybody remember Spalding balls, those pink rubber balls? Somebody here must remember Spalding balls. Thank you. And I had a brick house, and just like that wall, I would stand outside and I would throw the ball, bounce, catch, bounce, catch, bounce, catch. But that's not what was really happening. Inside my head were the stories. And they were not cute stories about children. No.
They were not.
No, they were not.
So, I've asked you partly about whether you ever taught, because I'm wondering what advice you would give to people. I'm thinking, you got all these letters from young people asking about advice, life advice. You must also have gotten letters asking about writing advice.
Writing advice is, if you're doing a novel, I don't know exactly what it is if you're doing nonfiction. If you're doing a novel, it's one scene at a time, one little scene at a time, because otherwise it's too overwhelming. I tell this to kids who ask me. It's too overwhelming to think of a whole book, but one little moment at a time. And it builds up.
So these stories that you're talking about that were inside you, they were in some part you, right?
No, not when I was 9 years old.
Oh, not 9.
They were much more melodramatic.
Oh, I
They
see.
were not about kids.
Yeah.
They were in my fantasy land of what the adult world was. Because really, I don't know if it's true today, but when I was growing up, the fantasy was to be an adult. Be an adult and have that kind of freedom. You don't have that freedom as a kid. You don't get to choose if your parents split up or if you're moving to another town. You don't get to make those decisions. It's hard enough as an adult that we get to make our decisions, but we're supposed to.
Yeah. So at a certain point, you also started writing books for adults. You ran up against resistance at that point as well, right?
You will ruin your career if
Really?
you do this. And if you're going to do it, you must use another name.
Use another name.
Yeah. Like, why didn't I? I don't know. I thought that's not radically honest. Is that the name of the show today? I just felt that was dishonest. I've written about the kid inside me, and finally I think I became a woman. Took me a long time to get there. And I had other stories I wanted to tell. Some of them were very naughty. The first one was very naughty, and I was told that would be the end of my career.
Yeah. That actually was pretty naughty.
It's pretty naughty.
Yeah.
It's fun. I got a poem from a guy, and it said, "You're rude and crude." Now I'm not going to be able to remember it. You're rude and crude. No, that's later. You're rude and crude. Da 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 da.
George, we need you up here. Perplexed and oversexed?
It ends with you're vexed, perplexed, and oversexed. So when can we have lunch? Yeah, I like that.
Is it the last book in The Unlikely Event?
Yes, my favorite. You want to know my favorite of the adult books? That was a book that I just feel I was meant to write. That was a story I was meant to tell. And why, as a novelist, fiction writer, did I wait 40 years to tell a story that was deep inside me, that happened in my town when I was 14 years old? And for that book, I got to do a lot of research. And what I discovered was research is so much fun. Why did I wait so long to do a book that required research? I loved it.
Why did you wait so long?
I was writing contemporary fiction. I didn't really need research. I had my own.
Yeah.
ideas and imagination and memories. But for this book, I needed research. And even though my memories of what happened in my town when I was 14 were very clear, I still did all the research. It took 5 years to do the book. So it's going to have its 10th anniversary. So when I finished it, I must have been, 76, right? And 5 years. And I said to George, anybody else who would listen, I'm done. I am done. I don't want to be locked up for another 5 years. And I was so lucky because right then, the idea for a bookstore fell out of the sky and became a real possibility. And so, lucky me, I get to go to work in a bookstore.
I want to talk about the bookstore and about the situation of books, but just that this sense of aging as a writer and as a person, and then writing that book, which became so important to you, and then making a decision. It's not you really made a decision, I'm done.
I did.
Yeah.
And I meant it.
But not everybody has that.
And I don't regret it.
Yeah, but not everybody knows when to stop.
I know. Well, I've thought for years and years and years that writers never retire. We don't retire. Why would a writer retire as long as we can tell stories? But what I learned as I grew older was, I don't want to be a Philip Roth here, who he also hung it up when he was, 80, I think, and said, the torture is over. And there is a lot of that, it's painful. It's hard. And I look back at the books and I know how important it was to me as a young woman to be able to write them and then to have them published. That was a fantasy, that was a dream. Someday maybe it will be published, and then someday maybe somebody will actually read it, and goes on. And being able to do that, it changed my life. It gave me everything, something that I desperately needed. And I never thought that I would stop. But
Until you did.
I did, and I wanted to go out on that book.
So the next chapter which you're in now, is as a bookstore owner in Key West.
No, not an owner, founder. George and I founded it.
Founder, okay. But this is your thing now.
Yes.
Which you now love. But we're in a period, and we'll get to some serious issues here, about how books are seen, and some books are taken off shelves.
But not in my bookstore.
Given what you've just said, and I also think about the changing world for young people, about reading with the phones we all have and social media, and how much are they reading at all? Are you hopeful, fearful as we sit here today?
I'm a hopeful person, for better or worse for me, but so I like to be optimistic about it. And I say to kids, you have to know how to read or you're not going to be able to do your social media, right? You have to know how to read, you have to know how to write. There are still lots of kids who want to read, who love to read. And when kids come into the bookstore and they want graphic novels, and many of them do now, and the parents or the grandparents are judgmental, I cringe, because I think you cannot be judgmental. If a kid wants to read a book, I don't care if it's Dog Man or Captain Underpants or what it is. It's a book, it has words in it, and let them start there and hope that they will move on to what their parents call real books.
All right.
Oh,
right.
Thank you. Thank you very, very much. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Beyond the Page. If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help support the podcast, please share it with others, post about it on social media, or leave a rating or review. A good one, we hope. To catch all the latest from the Sun Valley Writers Conference, be sure to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you'd like to listen to this conversation in its entirety, or to any of our other talks, you can find them at svwc.com. I'm John Burnham Schwartz. Until next time.